Hi, this is Stephen from Not Just Cables again. This is a continuation for the FreeNAS installation. This is pretty much the video after I've written the boot flash drive essentially for the FreeNAS PC or the demo PC. I've booted from that. It's given me an IP address which I put in here, which was 192.168.1.124 in my case. Your one should have shown you what the IP address was. If you're running a DHCP server, it should have picked it up on the network and giving you an IP address that you can actually log into from another system. If not, you can go in and manually set an IP address up suitable for your network. If you're not familiar with all this, you can read the documentation on how to set that up. It's not really too bad. Okay, so basically to get started, I just need to log in as the standard root account, which is a Linux default in this case. The new version of FreeNAS is pretty much set to root. I just need to put in my password and log in. Okay, so all I've done at this stage is I've edited the network settings. For some reason my mouse is doing some funny things. Okay, so it's corrected itself. It's doing something a bit weird there for a second. Alright, so for the standard things, you can go into network. My hostname, original hostname, or the default hostname for FreeNAS is actually FreeNAS. So I've put it for testNAS because I'm just using the default for my main one, FreeNAS, for ease on my network. So yeah, you don't want two host names the same on your network. It can cause a bit of grief. So interfaces, you've got network summary here, so it's picked up the default adapter, given an IP address 192.168.1.254, name server and router or gateway, and so on. So it should have internet access as it stands now. Within system, you can go to the general tab. I should say, by default when you first log in, it actually runs this little wizard which you can go through. In the case of this video, I'm not going to run through that. It sets up things which I don't really need for the purpose of doing this this demonstration. Okay, so you've got options. This is basically to do with the when you log on with the web GUI, you can set it to an IP address and so on. Not really covering any of these sort of settings essentially. The only thing I would do is just set your time zone. In my case it's Pacific Auckland. When I find it in there's a big list. So Pacific Auckland, and just hit save, and that's pretty much it for there. You can set time servers and so on. Don't really need to cover that in this either. What else do we need? There's email notifications, so you can have system emails sent to an email address. Things over here like user accounts and groups, I have set up quite a bit of this on my main server to allow access to certain things. Users, obviously, user access to certain shares and so on once you get it all set up. There's a whole raft of settings on the side here, but for what we're doing, it's pretty much just need to set a system name or host name. Make sure your network's correct. For storage, and there's quite a few good things within adding storage. If you had a FreeNAS box or had a couple of disks from an old FreeNAS box, you can actually go import, and it would import the disks, and once you select one, it should automatically find the matching pair to that drive. So if you had a RAID environment and set them up, I haven't mucked around with this too much, but I have used it once and it worked quite well. So in that regard, it does have some advantages over some of the standalone type NAS solutions that you can buy. Some of those aren't as user friendly. Like if you lose a disk or whatever, then it can be quite tricky to replicate that disk or correct the issue. within FreeNAS it's not actually too bad. Picks up errors, tells you the disk's faulty, which one, and so on. As long as you've labelled the disks, it's not too hard to find them. Can be a little bit tricky if you haven't. Okay, so as far as this goes, all we're going to do is import the volume. As you saw in one of the previous videos, I just plugged an old 320GB hard drive in, which is all we'll need for what we're doing. So you can go into Volume Manager. You need to give it a name. In this case I'm just going to call it storage. Down here it will show the available disks. For ease of installation, I'd probably recommend, like if you're a first time user especially, to FreeNAS. If you've got a whole bunch of drives, maybe you've got 4 or 6 drives that are all 3 terabyte. So if you put them all in the system at the same time, you won't know which ones are which. So my recommendation would probably be put 2 drives in. If you're doing a mirrored scenario, put 2 drives in and basically set them up first, and then label them RAID 1 or something like that. That's depending on what sort of RAID, do a read up of the RAID versions that FreeNAS supports, and do it that way. But it'll basically show the disks here. You can add the volumes in, or the drives in. They become a volume, so you can resize them, choose the RAID functions, etc. here, and then just add volume. So you can add extra drives to certain within FreeNAS. You can add more drives to it later on. You can expand the volumes and things like that, so it's quite flexible in that regard. So it does have some good advantages. Some of the NAS solutions I've used in the past, pretty much you set them up. If you want to change the volumes later on, you've got to start again. So you basically got to get new drives and copy all the data across, and so on. Within FreeNAS is actually a lot more flexible with the format that they use. So so there's definitely some advantages. In this case it's just one drive, so I can't really show you all those bits and pieces or that particular setup. So it warns you here that the data will be cleared, and it doesn't really matter for this drive, there's nothing on it anyway. So it'll add that in, and then the next step is basically adding some shares and access and so on for that drive, which I'll cover off in a second. Shares and sharing and folder shares and so on, you can do that across, well, you can actually set that up for different operating systems. So you can set up Mac shares and Linux and everything else. Okay, so you can see here it's picked up the drive, it's called it storage. You've got a whole bunch of options down here. You've got things like permissions, which we'll be covering off in a bit. In my case, for the ease of not mucking around too much with permissions and getting too sidetracked, all I'm going to do later on is just click other on both of these for the right permissions, so I've got full access to the drive and all the shares. By the way, if you set access here, it actually overrides any sharing permissions and so on as well. So if we go into here and add a network share, so I've gone to sharing, and then because we're on Windows, I'm using the Windows CIFS. So you just basically browse the path. All the drives will always be in mount. If you're familiar with Linux, you'll know all about that. Storage, now we can call this, give this share a name. So the main drive as such, or volume, is called storage. The name of the share, we'll call that, what are we going to call that? We'll call that test system, just as something to put it on there. For my case, I think I'll tick guest access as well, just to allow full access to that. It still won't allow me to write to it, but allows anyone on the network to be able to see that share. So we'll just click OK. There is advanced settings in there, we don't need to go into them at this stage. Alright, so what that's done, it's set up a share. it's put it in the storage volume. It's called it test system. Now the other thing which I haven't covered, which I think I've already turned on anyway, under services by default most things are turned off, or everything's pretty much turned off, so you need to enable the shares and configure them, etc. So yeah, so you just basically, I'll go back out of that for a second. You just click on this little thing here and it turns on and off different services. If you wanted an FTP server, you'd flick that on. If you wanted iSCSI, you turn that on. NFS, turn that on, and so on. So if you want terminal access to the system, which I'm not going to cover in this, it's SSH, you can turn that on temporarily. They recommend not leaving that on all the time, but yeah, it's up to you. Okay, so with SIFs, I've got that turned on now. You can click on the little spanner there, you can configure it. For my case, it's pretty much that should be okay for what I'm trying to do, so I can just leave that pretty much all default. Okay, so back into the shares. To display the shares that you've done, you've got your Apple, Linux. The one we're after is obviously Windows. You can click on that. You can click edit, you can go into advanced, and you can see there's other settings and access and so on that you can allow. So there's a guest only one, which sort of locks that down a little bit more. You can allow hosts and stuff, so IP addresses and so on. You can deny hosts. There's pretty much a whole bunch of settings in there. As far as the actual permissions themselves go, that is under the drive itself. So I probably said something different before, but it's okay. So you can basically go on here, change the permissions on that. Be with me a second, it's doing something funny again. I think that's just my computer playing up. Okay, for the sake of ease, what I'm going to do is basically allow write permissions to everything, and that basically means I'll be able to see that drive without any problem on my network and have write access to it. I'm just opening up that in another window now. So, okay, so you can see that now. I've just opened that up, and you can see it's test system. Because I've given it full access, I should be able to go new folder now and do whatever I like within that directory. Now I've created that new folder. I'm actually going to call that jails for the sake of the next step. So the jail, actually I'll just do that in caps. So the jails are essentially a destination for where we'll set up the jail location for all the virtual machines and stuff that run within NAS. Right, so that's pretty much that. I'll just move that to the side for the minute. The next step is pretty much just going to the jails. This is the configuration part, by default it'll just show that. So the jail root is pretty much that directory which I just set up. So you just click on browse, go to mount again, go to storage, highlight jails. That should be version 4. You don't, in fact we'll go into advanced mode, because normally what I do is actually set up a start and a finish IP address. So in my case I'm just going to go with, what are we going to go with? We'll go with 91. I can't remember what's on my network at the moment, so I've got things all over the place. So we'll go 91 and 95. This should be enough. So that's the IP addresses which it will assign any virtual machines that you run within FreeNAS. IP version 6 if you're using it, you can set that up, but in my case I'm just IP version 4. So that's pretty much it. So just go save on that, and eventually, yeah, it's come up and said it's saved successfully. So if you go into that, click on jails again, it goes back. Now the next stage, I'll just run through a couple of things on this. So you can add jails in. So this here will show you all the running or currently running jails on the system, or operating systems essentially. You've got your plugins section at the top here as well, which is quite cool. This shows you all the available plugins. This will take a couple of seconds to update off the internet because it's got to pull all the information down. Yeah, so these are all ones that community set up and various people have set up. Quite a good one, quite a good media system is this Plex media server. A lot of people will be familiar with that. There's all kinds of things in here though. There's torrent downloaders and different media solutions, media organizers, there's backup solutions. Some of these can be a little bit tricky to get going. They're not just a click install and hope it works type thing. You've got to know a little bit about them, have a bit of a patience and so on with them. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the plugins. And then if you click over here, it shows the installed ones. So you've got available, installed. You can upload your own as well. So if you found a plugin that isn't listed on here and it's supported by FreeNAS 9.3, you can basically click on the upload, find the files, and upload your own configuration to this as well. For the sake of what we're doing, this isn't really what I've done these videos for. It's actually for in here. If you go back to jails, you've also got templates for jails. So in my case, this is the bit that's actually quite good. This is the VirtualBox which I was talking about earlier. This is the main reason that I've done these videos, just to give people a bit of an overview of this. So okay, so basically you highlight that, add jail template. We call this a name. We'll give it a name. In this case, I'll just call it virtual machines. Yeah, you don't really need to click any of this other stuff. You should just be able to go OK on that, and it should be all good. Actually, take that back. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Yeah, I was actually clicking on the wrong thing there. What it was meant to be clicking on, when you're in templates, it's just a template. I went add template, which isn't the right bit to click on. I actually paused the video and just double checked what I was doing. But anyway, go into jails. It's actually add jail. It's actually been a while since I've mucked around with the jails and so on FreeNAS. So basically what it's done is set up the first IP address. This is that IP address range that I showed you earlier. So it's gone 1.91. You don't need to do anything with the netmasks. It's just the default 255.255.2550. Gateway, in my case it's 192.168.1.1. Bridge, you don't need to do anything there. Yeah, so all that's fine. And this one I'll just call this virtual machines. Just typing there. So basically the template is the VirtualBox is the one that we're after, so we can install this. There's probably not much else to actually do in there, and that should actually do the trick. So that's pretty much it. You just click OK, and if you scroll to the bottom of this page, it gives you an ETA. This didn't used to work that well, but it's about 10 minutes. So what it does, it downloads and installs that FreeNAS VirtualBox software. So if I just bring this drive back over here, I'll show you what it's doing in the background. So what it's doing at the moment, it's downloading that to that jails location as a template. So it'll download that, and then basically it'll set up another directory in here that will be called virtual machines, and that is where it will actually be running this software from. What I'll do now is I'll just pause, and I'll come back to it when it's pretty much running, and then I'll show you it from there. Okay, so that's run through, it's installed. You can see it here, it's called virtual machines. It's given an IP address of 192.168.1.91, which is what I set up earlier in my DHCP. Well, it was my settings basically within the jails configuration that I did earlier. Yeah, so it's set to auto start, which means it just starts up when FreeNAS reboots. It'll then start up these jails. If I had other ones in here, I could set into manual start or not. Status currently it's running. So the next step is basically logging onto this virtual machine. So what I need to do is open another browser. I'm not sure, just trying to think. Not sure if this browser will do the trick or not, but we'll find out. Okay, so that's fine. So the default on this is just admin, and the password is admin. We can log in there, and you can see there that yeah, you just got the VirtualBox running. Now the next step basically is just setting up a location for all your ISO images, etc. Because when you set these up, it can only see files within inside that jail. So what you actually need to do is set up a directory within that you can load all your ISO images or your operating system installation images to, and it'll actually load those and run them and install operating systems, whatever you want to run. So the way you do that, or the easiest way to do that I've found, is basically just going back into FreeNAS. You go into your storage, just clicking on the wrong thing there. You can click on storage, you've got your jails and so on. You can actually set permissions and so on within those. So this one, that's the main jails directory. So this is the virtual machines one that I just set up, so it's created its own little spot for that. You can set permissions on this. For the interim, you can change these back later on, but for the interim, in the interest of getting this set up easy, I'm just going to set them both to being able to write. Not the most secure thing in the world, but for what we're doing it doesn't really matter too much. Now if we go back down here and we put in tsnas, I think it was, actually I need the backslashes, should bring that up. Put it up on this other screen, so I'll just bring it over. So having a bit of fun trying to grab this window at the moment. Right, so we've got test system, in there we've got jails, in there we've got the templates, and also that one that we're running, the virtual machines one. Now there's a media one, you could put them in there. What I've done previously, I've just set up a new directory and I've called it ISO files, so you can do that. so it's allowed me to create that directory because I have full write access in there at the moment. Now I'm just trying to figure out what to put in there after all that. I could put, say, a Windows XP image in there. So what, we've got a Windows XP Service Pack 3 image, so I can copy that in. As you can see, we're not getting too bad a speed to that system. It's okay. So that's copied in. I don't know what else we could chuck. Just having a look through here what we've got. I've got a Windows 7 installer that I could copy in there. It's going to take a little bit longer, but shouldn't be too bad. What else? We could put maybe some Linux variants in there. So I've got some here that are specific ones. I'm just having a look through to see what else I can find. I could run FreeNAS within the FreeNAS. That would be pretty pointless, but I could do it. Let me see. Ubuntu. I've got quite a few different OSs here. Got an old version of Ubuntu, 7.04. Just copy that one in. So I've got a couple going now that'll probably slow things down a little. Okay, so that's a few different operating systems that I can select from. I'll just pause that while that copies and I'll come back to you in a second. Okay, so they're in there. For the interest of security, if you wanted to, you could go back in here and just untick the group and other write access into that directory, and then set up some permissions. Permissions in that, I could potentially cover that off in another video if need be. For my own network, I don't use any LDAP or anything like that. I don't use directory services and so on, so I'm just using basic user authentication, which is just set up in here, usernames and passwords based on FreeNAS. So yeah, so that's up to you if you want to take that out. For the interest of what I'm doing, I'm not too worried about the security on this particular setup. Okay, so from that we can go back to that web page that we were in before, and you can see basically you can add in a new virtual machine. You can give that a name. We'll call that what are we going to set up? Test XP, for example. In here you can select what operating system etc that you want to install, so you can see it gives you a good selection. You can actually run server and so on within this as well. I've actually done it before. I've actually had a 2008 server running within this, so you know, it works not too bad. So in this case it's just Windows XP, so we'll just click on next, select the amount of memory and so on that you want on that operating system. So you just drag this along. I could probably set that to geez, it doesn't really need that much, so we'll just put in a gig for memory. Click on next, create virtual hard disk. So that'll basically create that back in on the host, so we can create that now. You need to select the type. It's actually quite good, it actually covers off quite a bit, so you can set this up so it supports VMware if you wanted to. So you could actually run or set this up and then export it and then copy all those files and run the same operating system within VMware or so on. So it's quite flexible. So it does actually have quite a few options there. Choose the drive type, fixed size, dynamically allocated. Dynamic allocated is actually quite good. It means that it doesn't take up all that storage space, but it can expand out, and also allows you a little bit more flexibility later on as well. So just click next on that. drive size, doesn't need to be much for Windows XP, especially for what we're doing, so I'll just leave it default. You can just go create. Now what it does at this stage gets a little bit more interesting. When you go into this, you can see here it's got video memory, and it says remote desktop server port 9000 to 9100. What that is a port for Vnc Viewer to log on to the virtual machine. Because you don't technically have a screen connected to this, you need to be able to view that install happening and so on. So what you need is this little thing, Vnc Viewer or something similar. There's actually other things you can use to log onto this as well, but Vnc Viewer works quite well. So all you do, you've got this IP address here, 192.168.1.91. You can't log on until the virtual machine has actually started, but so that's one of my other machines. So basically all you do is you put in the 192.168.1.91 IP address and this port number in here. Usually it starts off at 9000 to 9100, so the first virtual machine would be 9000, the second one would be 9001, the third one would be 9, and so on and so on. Yeah, so it just works up the range. So by default the default port should be 9000, so I'm just going to leave that at that. It should let me connect. Now there's also a password, I think, from memory that you can set up on this. I haven't. I'll just see. I'll just have a look at that. Oh yeah, there's a password you can set there. So that's just under settings, display, and you can put a Vnc password. For this stage we can just cancel that. Now what we need to do next, I'm not sure why that is sitting there. Going a bit crazy again. My mouse is doing some funny things, so I'll just log back onto this again. Okay, so we're back in there. Okay, so the next step after that is pretty much just power on the system. So you just click on start, and it should, all going well, start up the system. Now this is the stage where it uses the disks that we selected earlier, or the images. So we should be able to go on there and see the ISO files. Open that up. Still doing some funny things. My mouse is just doing a couple of weird things. So anyway, we're after the XP, Windows XP Pro, Service Pack 3 ISO. Just click on OK, and basically click on start, and you can see in this little window here, it's just a little preview of what's actually going on. You can see that it's starting the Windows installation in the background there. So this is where you come across the Vnc Viewer. Yeah, so basically that's that IP address that I told you earlier. It's the IP address here, the port number is the first port number, and just go connect. It comes up with a warning that it's not encrypted, there's no password, so you should be able to just go OK. Okay, so there we are. So basically that's the window to that. You can full screen it. It doesn't really have any advantage because the graphics isn't set up on that virtual machine as of yet. So this is just your standard Windows installation. You can just use it as you normally would. So basically